Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. D.Z. Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial in Houston, Texas, and in the metropolitan area, and KTSUradio.com. Today promises to be a life-changing, life-saving show. April, Organ Donation Awareness Month, and that many times just slips under the radar because we don't talk a lot about organ donations and what role we can play in helping make sure that even in death, life can go forward, or how safe it is for us to donate an organ. We're going to talk about that today with two experts. But before we get there, let me take care of a couple of housekeeping matters. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Twitter at DZ Cofield, and you can follow me on Facebook at, you guessed it, DZ Cofield. If you'd like to become a member of KTSU, a supporter of KTSU beyond just listening, you can still do so. Membership is 365 days a year. If you text the word member to 713-313-4354, follow the prompts and you can become a member, or go to KTSUradio.com, click the support button and follow the prompts, and you can still become a member of KTSU. Also want to encourage you to know that there is no public radio without the public. That's you. You make us the special station we are. So no matter how large or how small your gift, I want you to know your gift makes a difference. Several months ago, actually now, a couple of years ago, it's amazing with COVID. We just literally lost a year, right? So I'm talking about a couple of months, and it's really been now a couple of years in 2019. I had a conversation with my cardiologist about fatty liver. And he was talking about this pending epidemic of cirrhosis of the liver cases, that there are a lot of people, because of the use of artificial sweeteners and because of alcohol and other things, that we're damaging our livers at record rates. Now, when I was growing up, the only people I knew who had a fatty liver or cirrhosis of the liver were alcoholics. They were people who drank and literally drank themselves to death. They didn't eat, they didn't exercise, they didn't drink a lot of water, et cetera, et cetera. And so I asked the doctor, I said, well, what's the cure for this? How can we reverse this? And he talked about the changes that need to be made and how we eat and how we live. But then he made a statement that was very interesting. He said, at the rate that people are getting cirrhosis of the liver, we don't have enough people registered for transplants to even service the people who are coming down the pipeline with fatty livers. Now, when you think about organ donations, many times we think about people dying and being an organ donor, but there are also living donors, and you can be one of them as well. I'm really excited to welcome to Real World, Real Talk our guests today, who are experts in this field of organ donation. I want you to welcome with me first, Dr. Shante Williams-Taylor. Actually, I just promoted her. Shante Williams-Taylor, she's been a member of the Life Gift team since October 1999 and currently serves as a director of family care. She is responsible for administering and coordinating exceptional customer care for professional partners and families to maximize donation opportunities. Williams-Taylor also serves as administrator on call to provide oversight for daily organ operations. And this is a tremendously important role that she plays in this system. I'm also happy to have with us Angela Hawkins. She is a living kidney donor and a Life Gift Ambassador of Hope. In 1999, over 20 years ago, she donated one of her kidneys to her uncle. After encountering people that lack knowledge about living organ donation, she was committed to educating the public about the value of organ donation and becoming registered organ donors. She volunteers at a wide variety of life gift events throughout the Houston metropolitan area. And when she's not volunteering, Angela is dedicating herself to her work in child development and early childhood education. I want you to join me today in welcoming to Real World, Real Talk our guests, Miss Shantae Williams Taylor and Miss Angela Hawkins. Ladies, how are you all doing?
Doing great, Dr. Cofield. Thank you so much for inviting us today.
So I really, really appreciate this conversation because, again, there's so many misconceptions, so much ignorance around the subject of organ donation. And it's especially important in the African American community. I know it's important in every community, but when you talk about matching people, people who do not register, people who do not get tested cannot be matched, and it's a challenge in our community. Let's talk about why that's an important observance.
And the importance of this month is to really celebrate those who've given the gift of life through organ donation, but greater still to increase awareness about National Donate Life Month and to get people to sign up and register to be organ, tissue, and eye donors.
So when you talk about organ donation, I think we typically think of, I know I do, one-to-one organ donation. You know, person needs a kidney, you donate a kidney. Person needs a heart, they get a call, a heart is available. But there's more to it than just an organ being donated. You also have tissue donors as well. And so here's the question. How many lives can be saved with one organ donor?
So one organ donor has the potential to save 8 lives. When you think about the organs that can be donated, you mentioned, the heart. We have our lungs. There are 2 lungs. The lungs can be transplanted into one individual, or the lungs can be given to 2 people. You have your kidney, same thing. One kidney transplanted into each individual. The liver. The liver could potentially be also divided into 2 and given to 2 people, as well as your pancreas and intestine.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, one of the side effects that we have seen, the lingering effects that we've seen with COVID-19, we've seen a number of people who have been in need of lung transplants, and some
Yes.
who were double lung transplants, some who were single lung transplants, and still dealing with the after effects of COVID-19. How has COVID-19 affected registration for organ donations?
So, Dr. Cofield, don't have the information on how it's impacted registrations, but what I can tell you, even for our country in the midst of this pandemic, the highest number of organ donors occurred last year, as well as the number of transplants in the country. So, while there's great evaluation in looking at those individuals that have had COVID and who may go on to become donors, there are organs being transplanted even after a patient has had COVID. And of course, those, as you mentioned, that have been impacted, their lungs specifically have been able to successfully be transplanted as well. So we will continue to move forward and evaluate patients that are registered, not registered, as potential candidates for donation.
So when you talk about registration, how can a person register to become an organ donor?
Okay. There are 3 ways currently here in Texas. The quickest way is by going to donatelifetexas.org and registering. It only takes so many minutes to do that. When you go to renew your driver's license, you can do it also at the Department of Public Safety, or if you're getting your vehicle registration, you can do it at the time that you're at the Department of Motor Vehicles. And for the global perspective for the country, every state has a registry, and then there's also also Donate Life America, in which an individual can also register.
Yep. So tell our audience what are some of the myths surrounding organ donation? And I know there's the living organ donor, and we'll talk to Miss Hawkins in just a minute. But for those who have deceased and are donating organs, what's the myth about organ donation?
So one of the biggest myths we hear is that if I'm in an accident and I get to the hospital, the doctors won't treat me if they're aware that I'm an organ donor. And that's far from the truth. When a patient arrives at the emergency room, the goal of the healthcare team is to exhaust all efforts to save the individual lives. And then secondly, the hospital does not have access to the registries. Only organizations such as LifeGift have access to the registry to identify whether or not a person was a registered donor or not. So they would not receive that information until we have been notified that there is a potential candidate for donation in the hospital, and we come on site and do the evaluation and have further communication with the healthcare team. So that's a big one. Another one is that, my body's going to be mutilated. I can't have an open casket funeral. And so just to speak to that, the donation does not hinder the family from proceeding with an open casket funeral. And donated organs and tissues are recovered surgically as any other surgery that a person has. It's a routine operation similar to open heart surgery. And again, it does not prevent an open casket funeral. And for families that do have concerns about, what their loved one's body will look like after recovery, we ask specific questions when we're meeting with these families in terms of their burial plans. And so that, we're reassuring these families that we will not interfere with the open casket funeral.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I'm of the mindset, when I'm through with it, you can have it all and do whatever y'all want to do with it. It's fine with me if it can help somebody else. I try to help as many people in life. And so if I can help 8 people in death, that's a wonderful thing. If you do that. Are there any limitations on who can donate organs in terms of illnesses and the like, especially if you have pre-existing health conditions and issues and things like that?
That Dr. Cofield, that was one other myth I was going to speak to, is age or medical conditions, because oftentimes people will say in the community, I'm too old to be an organ donor. I'm too sick. I've got diabetes. I have high blood pressure. And so one of the key things that happens when we're notified by the hospital is that we will complete an evaluation to determine in situations where people are on dialysis, they still can be donors. And so for across the country, along with LifeGift, when we're going on site to evaluate, when we receive that notification from a hospital, we're looking at every organ system, because if there's one organ that can be recovered from that individual and honoring their decision to be a donor, we're going to proceed with that, because that also means that there's one more person that's off the national waiting list. And so our goal is to maximize the donation opportunity. So every opportunity we will evaluate. We have many individuals that have diabetes, high blood pressure, and we still want to proceed and recover those gifts and to save the lives of others.
Yeah, one of the clients that you all have is Mr. Ted Adderley, and he and I had an opportunity to talk. And I was blown away by his story, the fact that he had 30 minutes to live and received a heart 21 minutes into that 30 minutes. So literally 9 minutes to spare when doctors had predicted that he would pass, and he was able to get that heart transplant and is alive and well now. This national registry is so important. And I'm just curious, because I know when organs are being harvested, there's a time sensitivity in terms of receiving that organ and then transplanting that organ. What is the success rate of organ transplants? I know there have been tremendous strides over the last several years regarding, successfully transplanting and expanding the boundaries of organs that can be transplanted.
So One of the things that we talk about is procuring organs for transplant or recovering organs for transplant. And the focus again is on maximizing the donation opportunity. So, as I previously mentioned, for individuals with underlying medical conditions, they're still able to donate organs. And there's also a big push in our industry to focus on recovering organs from older donors. And when you think about the national waiting list, there are currently almost 114,000 people awaiting a life-saving organ across this country. And in the state of Texas, we're right at 10,000 people waiting. And these are individuals who are very sick. So when we're looking at and evaluating candidates for donation, we're looking at how we can save the lives of these individuals when another person has been declared dead. And so if that opportunity is there to recover an organ and transplant an individual and give them a better quality of life, that's our goal, is to do that. Now, in terms of when you talk about the success rates, it varies from individual in each organ system. And so to just give you a percentage, I don't have that information, but what I can tell you is for somebody who is on dialysis, getting a kidney transplanted can provide a better quality of life than being required to go to get dialysis 3 times a week. But we do know that transplantation is successful and can extend the life and enhance the lives of individuals for a long period of time.
All right, Ms. Hawkins, we got to get you in on this conversation because you are a living donor. And I want you to tell our audience about your story and how you got to the place where you were faced with the option to donate one of your kidneys and what made you do that. So tell us your story.
So back in November of 1999 is when the actual donation happened. But I had my uncle at the time had suffered from high blood pressure for many years. And even after being treated for it, it took its toll on his kidneys. And so he opted to do at-home dialysis. And he probably did that for only about 6, maybe 7 months or so. Because he asked the family members, would they be interested in donating a kidney? And so when it's my mother's brother. So when my mom called me in a different city to say, hey, would you like to donate a kidney to your uncle? And I'm like, let me think about it. And really, I just took the time. I read online. I did the research. And in a couple of weeks, I called my mom back and said, "Yep, tell Raymond I'll donate him a kidney." Well, of course, he called me to make sure I was serious, and so it was easy for me to make the decision because I did the research and I did the reading on it was a safe surgery. But from there, the hospital takes you through a ton of tests to make sure you're healthy enough to donate because they don't want to do any harm to the person donating. So it was a few months of scheduling back and forth to get all of the testing done on me. And after a few months of that, they told me I was cleared to be a donor. I was a good match. And so it all worked for me. And so it was just a matter of scheduling. And so we scheduled surgery in November. It was a 6-week recovery. My uncle stayed behind in New Orleans, Louisiana, because he had to be close to the hospital. I recovered at my mother's house for 6 weeks because they wouldn't have it any other way. And after the 6 weeks window, I was able to move back to my own place. And both my uncle and I returned to work in January of 2000. So it was pretty successful for us. And for me, once again, it was an easy decision. But in preparing for the decision, we encountered people who doubted the surgery, who doubted whether or not I should, donate, who questioned, why would I even consider such a thing? I would be hurting myself, and all of the things that led me to become a volunteer. But we just rallied ourselves around myself and my uncle and said, "This is what we're doing," and the whole family supported us every step of the way.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. We're talking about Organ Awareness Month, which just passed the month of April, but I really felt like this was an important subject, and I want to thank Ms. Shantae Williams-Taylor and Ms. Angela Hawkins for being with us. So, Ms. Hawkins, I don't think there's any question at the family reunion who's your uncle's favorite niece. That's like hands down, like you win that every time. That's like Big Joker. I gave him a kidney. That's it. And you know, it's interesting because I always tell my nieces and nephews that I'm going to be really, really nice to them, just in case my children don't want to act right when I get old. I need to sow some good seed. So when you say it was an easy decision for you, I'm sure beyond the health implications, you know, your uncle's somebody, of course, that you have tremendous affection for and love for, etc. What were some of the concerns and things that you heard from people? I'm sure when you said I'm gonna donate a kidney, they were like, "Well, what if your other kidney goes bad? What if,
Yeah, yeah,
you know?"
that was something common. What if your other kidney goes bad and you need it? I'm like, well, hopefully there's a family member who'll give me one of theirs. But that is a real concern. You might need it. You might need to give it to your child or something. But some of the other things were that you're too young. And I was in my mid 30s at the time, but you're too young. You never know what health problems you might have. You might need both of your kidneys down the line. And again, I just said, well, whatever may happen, may happen. I'm going to trust the medical professionals who are going to run a ton of tests on me. And then they're going to tell me if I'm healthy enough to donate. The other thing is, people thought that transplant surgery was experimental. And this was 1999, and they thought it was just something that rarely happened. And, people off and away someplace else did that. And my uncle lived in a small town in Southwest Louisiana, so they hadn't really even heard of that, especially in the Black community. Living donor, what? No, what they knew was you started on dialysis and you died on dialysis. That's all they knew, because that's what people did. Once your kidneys went out, you went to dialysis, and that's what happened. You died. And so we were just committed to showing them a different way and showing them that, there's a full life for both of us after the donation.
Yeah, Shante, you were shaking your head yes as Miss Angela was talking. Is that a story that rings true for you as well?
It is. I will tell you, just in being in the industry for the last 22 years, and getting family members to understand the work that I do. And I will tell you, in hiring people for Life Gift, I let them know that you become the expert on donation because it becomes a subject. If you're in the grocery store line, the hair salon, and you mention that you work in organ donation and organ donation and transplantation, it's a conversation. It's not just, then people are really curious because there are so many myths and misconceptions. So you're the expert and you're educating all the time and dispelling the myths that people have about donation. So I just listening to you, Angela, I could nod yes, because I started on the other side in ICU and working with those patients that needed a transplant. And there's just so many misconceptions, and I just want people to be educated about it. And the need for living donors, I mean, especially for dialysis, 83% of our list nationally is people waiting for kidneys. And people are not aware. And you talked about matching earlier, Dr. Cofield. Certain DNA and ethnic backgrounds do match more effectively than others. And so when we're talking about matching for kidneys, it sounds like Angela was a great match for her uncle.
Yeah, absolutely. Angela, talk about the decision to become a Life Gift Ambassador of Hope. I think that's just a great name. Every word is so powerful and so meaningful. Why you made that decision?
Well, again, because after the surgery, I was committed. I was committed to informing people, first of all, about living donation, because it was such a weird concept to a lot of people we talked to. But the other piece was just to become an organ donor when you pass away, because that's how most people, the vast majority of people, are donors that way. So I just needed to be a person who volunteered and passed the message on. And so I was still living in Louisiana at the time in 1999. So after surgery, I volunteered in Louisiana. But when I moved to Houston in 2002, I mean, I just signed up with Life Gift. I found them online and said, I want to be a volunteer. And so I've been a volunteer with them, and I've moved away from Houston and come back. And I came right back to it with Life Gift. And even when I lived away from Houston, I volunteered with other organizations. But I was just committed to passing the message on, and especially passing the message on in the African American community. And so it was something that I did. And, the volunteer opportunities that I have are amazing. I can tell you over the years, I've spoken, I do speeches. And so I've spoken at churches. I've spoken at Ben Taub Hospital to nurses. We've been at Texas Children's Hospital talking to family members and of the children who are waiting for a transplant. I have volunteered at the Pride Festival in Houston, the Chinese New Year Festival, um, and just so many opportunities. Fifth Ward. So I try to get to as many opportunities in the African American community. So Fifth Ward had a health fair a couple of years ago, and so I volunteered for that. I love volunteering for the donor medal ceremony. And that's when Life Gift takes time to say thank you to the families who chose to donate the organs of their loved one. And so it's a bittersweet kind of a ceremony, because the families come out and there's a picture of their loved one who passed away and their loved one, whose organs are helping someone else to live. And so we as volunteers just hand the medal to the family. But I love doing that. And that's just a beautiful ceremony. And so other things that I have done is cook dinner at Nora's home, which is a home that is a place where families who are impacted by transplants or the transplant patient can stay a little charge or sometimes free of charge. And so Life Give volunteers will cook dinner. And we just don't cook dinner and clean up and go. We cook dinner and we sit and we socialize with these transplant patients from all over the country. And it's right in the Texas, near the Texas Medical Center. And the other thing that I've done this last year, during COVID, we've had to switch a lot of our volunteering to virtual. And so I had to, beef up my tech skills to do virtual volunteering. But everything from posting videos on my Facebook page, and August is National Minority Donor Month. And so my 17-year-old granddaughter does video clips of me, and I post those on Facebook. I posted another during Black History Month. She did a video of me just again promoting the message through my Facebook page. And the other thing that I was tied to through Life Gift was nationally, I participated in a focus group through the Charles Drew School of Medicine out in California, which I didn't even know was an HBCU medical school. And so, over the course of about 4 months, with other people from across the country, we participated in a focus group. And this group of medical professionals, recipients, donors, and entertainment media people were coming together to create a TV show, an educational TV show focusing in on educating the Black community about organ donation. And so I was just excited to have been chosen by Life Gift to participate in that. And so that was about last year. I did that. And then the other thing that recently have been connected to through Life Gift is a campaign called Honor the Gift. And this is the first time I'm being pulled into advocacy for legislation that's going to impact organ donors and after they've given the gift and the recipients of those gifts. So I've met with a PR firm, and I'm hoping that I can also participate in that, and that's going to take my volunteering the advocacy route, which I haven't necessarily done yet. But I volunteered at a brewery. There's a family whose son died as a result of a drunk driver. So they do an event at one of the breweries here in Houston. And literally, we're at the brewery saying to people, register to be a donor. But their son was young and he was in college, and they just chose that. And so it's a fun kind of event. And we've done events at a jewelry store. So every year, this family who lost a 2-year-old in the Houston area, they have this event at the jewelry store, and the jewelry store donates the proceeds from the purchases that night to the foundation and our Life Gift. But it's just a wide variety of events But I especially like to do events that target the Black community. But I'll do events anywhere. If I'm available, I'll do it because the message to me is important. And if I could just have one person choose to donate, it just makes a difference.
Well, I tell you what, you have a full schedule, Shantae. I don't know how many volunteers and ambassadors that you have like Angela, but if you do, you have an army that will go undefeated, no question. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to The Choice 90.9 KTSU. We are your community station. We're talking about Organ Donor Awareness Month, the month of April, the month we just came out of. And I am excited to have these two ladies to talk about the importance of organ donation. Shantae, if you will, talk a little bit about the importance of getting this message out in the African-American community. You talked about 83% of those who are waiting for donations or waiting for kidneys. We have so many pre-existing conditions, disparities in our community, diabetes, congestive heart problems, lung issues, and the like. Why is it so important for African Americans to participate in this organ donation process?
So I will say the first thing is by registering to be a donor, it gives that individual the power, the decision, and the family doesn't have to make that decision. But it also makes their decision known about wanting to help other people. The need is great for African Americans, and I will want to give you some statistics from the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network. And this is information from 2020 that African Americans represented 13.4% of the overall U.S. population, but made up 35% of all patients in the U.S. receiving dialysis for kidney failure, and 32% of patients waiting for a kidney transplant. The good news is that there was an increase in the number of kidney transplant for Black recipients. It had increased 44% since 2014, but the need is still there. And I think the biggest thing is becoming aware, being educated about it, and asking questions if they're not certain. And across the country in the U.S., there are 57 organizations like LifeGift that increase awareness about organ tissue and eye donation. So I think the biggest part is just people becoming educated. And I think it's just the power of their voice and letting others know what their decision is about organ tissue and eye donation. What we do know is that if given the opportunity, most people are willing to save the lives of other individuals. And so it's time for us as African Americans to get involved, become educated about it, and so that we're aware and we're making an informed decision for ourselves regarding end of life.
One of the things that Angela talked about that I thought was fascinating was gathering organ donors together, those who are in need. I'm sure you also have some reunions and gatherings of those who are living donors. I'd like for you, Shantae, if you can, and Angela, if you would join in, to give us the picture, one, of a family when you call them, Shantae, and you say, we have an organ that's been donated for you and we're ready to go. What kind of reactions and response do you get from that? And then secondly, when a person has died tragically, there's no consolation that you can give to them to make it okay. But how do you help families with the grief and to get a sense of purpose out of their family member's death when they're able to see 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 people whose lives have been extended, the quality of their life has been changed because of an organ donation or because they committed to being an organ donor? So can you two talk about that a little bit, please?
Okay. So in terms of, I'll start on the with the beginning of the process when we're notified and our staff are going to meet with these families. We recognize we are dealing with the family suffering loss. So understanding, where they are in that grief process is so important. And, our staff are very compassionate as we are broaching the subject of donation with the family, whether their loved one is registered or not. We want to be supportive and we want to know about their loved one because what we find is many individuals, based on how they live life, their story and their legacy is already began, and donation is an opportunity to continue that legacy of giving and helping others. So, what we hear from families once they've said yes to donation or honored their loved one's decision for donation is that organ donation has helped them heal in their grieving process. There's a sense of altruism where there's a concern about others and they want to help other people. And some feel it's somewhat that moral obligation. When I talked about the opportunity to help other individuals, these families want to donate. They want to save their lives. They want to end the suffering of those that are waiting for a transplant. So many of them see this as a way of continuing the legacy of their loved one by giving the gift of life. And so, one of the things that Life Gift does facilitate with our aftercare program, where we continue to work with these families even after donation, and many become ambassadors of hope, such as Angela, but there are others who find value and meaning that their loved one's death is not in vain. And they go on to create these foundations and do events to continue to increase awareness about donations. But what we do once a year, in our aftercare program, we have a donor medal ceremony where the families can come and receive the medal honoring their loved one as an organ donor or tissue and eye donation. And we celebrate them. We want them to know that it's not over just because they said yes. It's not over after the donation. We will continue to support these families. We do have our aftercare program that is a 12-month program where throughout the course of the year, there's remembrance of their loved one throughout the year, as well as the opportunity for us to provide grief resources for these families. So it doesn't just stop after donation, but I will say to see a family at the different times of the year when we have events or meetings is so key. One other high point I feel that for these families, whether it's the donor family or the person receiving the gifts, is when we facilitate donor family recipient meetings. So it's an opportunity to bring together that family who lost a loved one and the person that received the gift. We will bring those individuals together when the two are in agreement to meet. And sometimes they find each other even before we are involved in that process.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit because I can imagine how I would feel if I needed an organ and I received an organ from a stranger, especially out of a tragedy.
Yeah.
But then to be able to come together and meet with their family, I mean, I can only imagine, and I don't want to call it pressure, but responsibility that I would feel to really make sure that this gift of life is not wasted. I may have wasted what I had, but when I get this gift of life from somebody else, I want to make sure that I make the most of it. Share some of those experiences and stories if you can.
Sure. So, I think that when donor families are really, many of them really want to meet recipients, and sometimes there's a delay in recipients being able to communicate or engage with the family because what they struggle with, and what we hear from those that are waiting, is knowing that somebody died in order for them to receive a second chance at life. And so that's really tough for them. And they have to navigate through that aspect in knowing that somebody died in order for me to live. And so there's a lot of gratitude that's also expressed when we have these meetings, and sorrow expressed also for the family that suffered the loss, but the gratitude that's shown towards the family when they meet them. What we find from many of the families when they do come together, that now they have extended families. I can think of several families I work with where they were on their daughter was a donor, and then later on the father needed a liver. It was an opportunity opportunity that they gave life, and when they needed it, somebody gave life back to them so that the father continued to live on. And so for them, and I can think of their reunion when they met their daughter's liver recipient, it became part of a bigger family. The family grew. They were part of her wedding. They were part of her college graduation. So it becomes, to me, I would say, a blended family when they're able to connect. And it goes to the level in which the two parties are in agreement and want to continue on that relationship. Some families on both sides don't want to meet. In terms of the gift and cherishing the gift, I'm reminded of a volunteer that worked with us many years ago, an ambassador for hope. And one of the things he would always say when he would go out and speak, when we would go and speak at the nursing schools and things like that, he would tell them that he never had the opportunity to meet his donor family, but if he could, the one thing that he wanted them to know was that the gift that they gave was honored, respected, and cherished. And the opportunity they gave him to see his daughter go through the things you would want to see your daughter go through, graduate high school, attend college, and get married, and gave him a grandchild. So there's a lot of gratitude there. There is the pressure to ensure that they're maintaining that gift. So it's really important. But it's a beautiful thing to see the two families come together.
Yeah, Angela, you're shaking your head. Yes. Tell us some of your experiences.
Well, I get to hear those stories. As volunteers, we're not involved at all in that process. I think the closest I've ever come to being involved in that process was they were trying years ago. They were trying to clear up the database of families, the donating families or whatever, and so I had to sign some disclosure saying I wouldn't, divulge any of this computer information. But all I did was match and correct names on the list. In the office, but I don't get to be a part of that. We as volunteers don't, but I love hearing every story that the staff tell about how they connect the donor family with the recipient, and it's just a beautiful thing. And I will never get tired of hearing those stories, because that means in death, the family chose to give life, and give life multiple times over, most times.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to ask you, Shante, if you can tell us, because you talked about up to 8 lives being saved by one person. What was, I guess, the largest reunion? Because I'm just thinking, as a family member, if I had a loved one who was deceased and we could donate their organs, to me, that would be better than any other celebration you could have of that person's life, to know that that person lost their life and gave life out
Mhm.
of their life. Um, what was the one that just kind of sticks out to you and was like, wow, like this is really cool? I'm a crier too, so I know I would have been crying. But
Yes,
what's the
that
story?
there's a lot of laughs and a lot of cries. It wow. Over the years, there's just been so many. And even with us being virtual now, we had one that was really large because we had so many family members. We invited the Life Gift staff were there, the Transplant Center staff were there, the families were there. And being that everything has been virtual right now, we've even done it across states where, the donor was here, but the recipient is in another state. With using virtual, we've been able to pull together a large group, give different individuals the opportunity to speak, hearing from different family members. And this one, it just recently is probably the one that stands out the most because it was across state lines. And we had people from Houston and Mississippi, and they were organ transplant staff. There were family members of the donor and the recipient, and Life Gift staff, and our executive leadership. I mean, everybody came together for this in support and recognition of this individual who said he wanted to be a donor. He registered himself, and in celebration of him and his life, his legacy, and how the legacy goes on at a young age, and the number of people that he saved, and the number of recipients that were present and their families doing this reunion. It was just beautiful. In person, like I said, I've had the experience of having a weekend with a family reunion when I was in our West Texas location, and pulling a family together after 10 years after the transplant. So it doesn't always happen right after the transplant, but being able to pull this family together, being able to come from a different city and pull the families together. They ate lunch together in our office. We transitioned to later that even they went to dinner on their own. There was church service on Sunday morning, and then more events with the families and just them spending time together, learning about the donor, learning about why this individual needed a transplant. And so it was a great sharing of information. There were a lot of tears, but there was also joy and knowing that their loved one had saved someone.
What message do you have for those who may not be convinced that they can make a difference by registering to be an organ donor? Angela?
What I would say to them is, if you've lived your life, and you've had a good life, even if you've had trials and tribulations, what would you want to leave behind as your legacy, irregardless of how difficult or how great your life was? I'd say, would you like to impact other people? Would you like to help others to live? And I try to take it from that standpoint. What would your legacy be? And would you like a part of your legacy to be that 2 or 3 or 4 or 8 people can live as a result of what I've decided to do? And so I try to take it from that standpoint. Another way when I talk to volunteers, and this is more one-on-one, when I meet random people in the grocery store, or, at a restaurant, is, do you know someone waiting for an organ? Well, the
Yes.
only way they're going to get that organ is if we go to the DMV or we go online and say, I want to be a donor. That's the only way. And many times people have relatives, or they know people who died. Because when I got ready for transplant surgery, I was on a job for like 7 months. So it was new to me. I didn't even qualify for FMLA. And I had to tell my boss that, guess what? I need to take 6 weeks off. And I only had 2.5 weeks of leave, maybe 3 weeks. And I was afraid, right? I was afraid that, this is a new job. I'm here, but I was determined to do it. So I prayed on it. And then when I approached my boss, she started crying. And I thought, okay, something's wrong. And when she dried her eyes, she said, I will do whatever you need to do, whatever I need to do to help you to, I worked from home, to work from home for the remaining 3 weeks, and not have to travel. And I said, okay. She said, my son died waiting for someone like you. So
Wow.
I am going to do whatever it takes. And I have a job that requires 50% travel. She said, you can serve your clients this way, and this way from the bed. I will do whatever it takes for you to continue working. And that was a sign to me that I'm doing the right thing. And so you never know how people have been impacted until you talk to them, until you share
Yes.
your story with them. I would have never known that this lady's son died waiting for an organ. And she said, I'll do whatever. My son never had the chance. He never had the opportunity.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a powerful message,
Mhm,
Angela.
mhm.
Dr. Cofield, I'd just like to touch on what Angela said. I think this is where there's an outward focus in thinking about others. And I'm going to take it inward and something to think about as well. If you were in need of a gift, what would you expect others to do?
Yeah.
If thinking back to Teddy's story and knowing that he had 30 minutes, what would you do? If that
Yeah.
were your family member, you would hope and expect that somebody was going to give a gift. Now is the opportunity for each one of us to make that decision ahead of time by
Yeah.
registering to become an eye organ and tissue donor. And I want to touch that, with tissue donation, that gift, We have listed 75 individuals, but the various grafts from the gift of tissue donation, including bone, skin, corneas, so many other individuals can be helped. And with heart valves in the pediatric environment, those children at Texas Children or any pediatric facility that have heart conditions, they're awaiting those valves. And so there's an opportunity to help in so many ways just by the power of your yes to become an organ tissue and eye donor, and again to save the lives of countless individuals.
Wow. How can people register if they'd like to become an organ donor? What can they do?
So again, going to Donate Life Texas and registering, it's a couple of minutes just to complete the form. You can specify which gifts you want to donate. Also, there's more information for you to increase your awareness about organ tissue and eye donation. At DPS, they just asked you if you want to be an organ donor on the form. So it's not as much information, but there are brochures that are left there. And also at the DMV when you renew your vehicle registration. I know that some of the apps on some of the phones, the health app, there's an opportunity to register also utilizing that app.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you stated earlier is that for those of us who have any foresight, we can register now. We can make our wishes known. If you have not registered, have that conversation with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to them. Let your wishes be made known. I want to be an organ donor. I want to see life come out of my death. And that's a powerful message. It's a powerful thought. It's a powerful idea, and lives can be changed. Families can be changed.
Mm-hmm.
Literally generations can be changed. I mean, I can think back to, my own life and people who have touched my life and those that could have been gone if they needed an organ and they couldn't get it, and what difference they've made just being there and how we can help somebody along the way. What are some closing thoughts, Angela, that you'd like to share with our listening audience? And then we'll conclude with you, Shante.
I would just say to everyone is please take the time to do your own research, become educated and informed, and just make the decision to save someone else's life. Just consider it, but do your own research and you'll see the information is there.
Now, Angela, we talked earlier, for those of you who may be just tuning in, Angela is a living organ donor, donated her kidney to her uncle. And I'd like to ask you personally how you feel about that decision. I mean, being able to know that you gave your uncle an opportunity to have a higher quality of life and to extend his life.
It was the most important decision of my life, more important than becoming a mother, because I feel like I gave birth twice. I gave birth to my daughter in 1981, and I gave birth to my uncle in 1999. And it was the most important decision. There was nothing about it that I would change, because I'm a better person, more informed person, and he got a chance to have a full life, as a result of that.
That's awesome. Shante?
Just to echo what Angela just said, the importance of registering, making your family aware that you have made that decision for yourself. It takes the weight off of your family upon your death to have to make that decision for you. So be empowered to make the decision for yourself by going and registering to become an organ tissue and eye donor.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you both so much for being with us on today and shedding light. This is a tremendous need in the world today, period, but especially in communities of color, because we know tissue matching is one of the factors in that are cultural connectivities and ethnic connectivities. And so I'm really grateful and thank you for sharing your stories on today.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. And I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And I think all of us would agree the fight for life is a fight that we should all be engaged in. What's interesting is when you talk about organ donation awareness, you're not only fighting for life while you're living, but you're given an opportunity to fight for life even after you're gone. And that's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. I'm hoping that when I close my eyes, that 8 families can be helped. I don't know. I'm using this stuff pretty good, what I have, but I'm hoping that 8 people can be helped. I'm hoping that more people than that can get helped by my donating my organs to an organization like Life Gift. And I hope you will do the same. Go to the DMV, register, say, I want to be an organ donor, register with a group like Life Gift, make your intentions known to your family, and give life even on the other side of your earthly demise. What a tremendous opportunity it is to be a blessing to others. This is Dr. DZ Cofield for Real World, Real Talk, signing off. You've been listening to The Choice, 90.9 KTSU, your community station. Stay tuned for V. Michael McKay, David Goldstein, Asia, as they come with truth right here on KTSU. Until next time, God bless is my prayer.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.